Well, aloha and happy Wednesday. Thank you for joining us here on Spotlight Hawaii. I'm Yanji Denise, joined by Ryan Kalei-Suji. And Ryan, today we have a guest that is always very popular.
That's right. Tonight we are spotlighting the Garden Isle. So joining us from Kauai is Kauai Mayor Derek Kawakami. Good morning, Mayor. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, and good morning to everybody.
Let's start and begin with just a broad picture of what's happening right now there on Kauai. How is the island doing in response to COVID-19 and some of the adjustments that you're making as you look at this reopening phase of the county?
Oh, well, we're doing very well on many different fronts. Of course, we're still trying to get as much people vaccinated. Fortunately, Kauai has had a tremendous jump start with all of our partners from the get-go as far as getting as much people vaccinated as possible. We're having a huge return on the visitor industry, which comes with some challenges and hiccups. And of course, the day-to-day business of our county operation is rolling ahead full steam. Again, we always strive for perfection, understanding that we have a lot of room to improve. But as far as roads, public works, parks and rec, things seem to be firing on all cylinders. I do know that it is a big challenge on Kauai to just find workers to be able to handle the increase of visitors coming in. And, the state is very close to hitting that 60% threshold to increase capacity. So we want to make sure that our private sector partners have the workforce to be able to accommodate the increase in capacity as well.
One thing that we talked about during the pandemic was this sort of tourism reset that we were all sort of experiencing with no one on the beaches other than Kama'aina, and then now having to share all of our spaces once again. What are you hearing from your constituents in terms of how that is going? Because I know that on other islands, Maui in particular, there's been a lot written about tension that is happening because of a lot of traffic and just, again, having to share that space with all of these tourists that are now coming.
Yeah, I think we're all going through an acclimation period, myself and my family included, and that's a natural thing to happen. But I think really what the pandemic identified is some of the challenges that we were faced with as far as traffic and housing, having enough parking stalls at our popular beach parks. And really, the whole state and world got to experience how the industry impacts that level of quality of life. And now it's up to partnering with our private sector to come up with long-term solutions to be able to change things so that we can bring back some balance to our lives while allowing a very healthy return to our economy through the visitor industry.
There have been suggestions of how to manage that. Some of that coming from the legislature saying that we should put that fee on the tourists and visitors themselves by increasing some of the taxes that would be going towards those who are visiting the islands and making them pay for a service charge or in the hotel room tax. There are various ways. Well, what are your thoughts on any additional taxes or fees that would be passed on to those visitors and having them pay for a more exclusive trip, I guess, to the islands and increasing that price point overall?
Well, I think it boils down to everyone paying their fair share. And I think for a lot of people that live in Hawaii, they feel that they are paying more than their fair share. And I wouldn't disagree with that notion because just the cost of living in Hawaii and being geographically isolated is expensive in and of itself. And people are working 2 or 3 jobs just to try to make ends meet. And so, I think the state of Hawaii and the county of Kauai has to, what I would say is, know our worth. When we travel to the mainland, we pay fees to get into parks, and we pay to park. We pay to go and be a visitor in other areas, and we have to take a look and assess whether or not we're charging our fair share to the visitors that are coming in. Take, for example, one thing that I identified is for our campgrounds. It's very cheap for non-residents to be able to reserve a camping area and enjoy, our beautiful coastline. And I would say that I do not think in that sense that they are paying their fair share, and we're going to have to reassess the fees that we're charging non-residents to get out to our campgrounds. And it goes on and on. I mean, when we take a look at some of the traffic that we're faced with, it might not necessarily be a fee or a tax. It might be a new model of moving visitors from point A to point B. And that's why we're working very closely with the Hawaii Tourism Authority and the private sector to sort of create a shuttle service to move visitors in different ways so that we can relieve some of that congestion and relieve and save some of those parking stalls for the people that live here as well. And, we've proved that concept works down in Haiena with the Haiena State Master Plan. And now we're just trying to overlay that model across the entire island. And that's going to be a work in progress.
Well, let's talk a little bit about more about the traffic and this idea that maybe we don't want a return of all the rental cars that we had pre-pandemic. I know that there's a shortage, of course, across the state of rental cars. People are paying top dollar, and now there's the introduction of more and more private shuttles and doing more to manage that. So as you said, there would be more parking spaces. Do you think that we should limit the number of rental cars that are allowed to return? Or should there be more state-sponsored shuttles or more private shuttles? What's a way that we can manage the traffic? Because particularly where you are, there are a lot of very small roads that simply can't handle every tourist and every resident having a car.
Absolutely. There should be a limit because we have a carrying capacity, and I can tell you that pre-pandemic and what we're experiencing now, it is obvious that the amount of rent-a-cars and people just driving their own vehicle put our infrastructure over capacity. When people have an erosion of their quality of life because they are stuck in traffic, there is no balance. And that's what we're trying to do. As far as shuttle model, it's always best when we have a public-private partnership, which means that we're meeting each other halfway. We've worked with the Hanalei Initiative on the shuttle out there. We provided some resources to help kickstart that operation. And very much like what we're dealing with right now, the county has many different ways to come to the table. If we have to create a shuttle lane at our popular beach parks, we can go ahead and start doing the engineering and blueprinting of our public facilities to best accommodate shuttles coming in, dropping off visitors, getting the visitors to where they want to set up and hang out at our beaches, identifying pickup areas, working with our hotel concierge office to educate our visitors. There's many different ways that we can accomplish some of our goals. And some of them would require a fee, but it's always best if we can start to identify low-hanging fruit that are easily achievable. And I really think that working with the private sector as far as a shuttle service is one of those low-hanging fruit items that we can work on immediately.
There obviously has been a lot of changes to the Safe Travels program that the state initiated to help those who are coming to the islands or visiting the islands. We know recently there was that change that was made to those who have gotten a vaccination shot here in Hawaii. They can bypass that quarantine or that testing. However, we have not reached that 60% threshold yet that would allow others from other states to verify that they have been vaccinated just yet. Recently, the Lieutenant Governor calling on the governor to lift those restrictions ahead of the July 4th of July holiday to ease up on some confusion that may be happening. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that the state should continue to maintain the current 60% benchmark threshold for the vaccinations for the state in order to bypass some of those procedures to come in for those who have not been vaccinated within the state?
Yeah, I think right now we should stick to the 60%. Let's face it, there's been confusion from the get-go. It's a confusing time, right? We're dealing with a pandemic. The way we travel has new policies, new procedures, very much like after 9/11 and, TSA, there were some changes that happened, and there's going to be a period where people have to get acclimated to, I guess, what they're used to the new process. But, we're really close to the 60%. I may not have all of the details of what the Lieutenant Governor is looking at as far as the mass confusion that is of concern. And so he may have it as a higher level priority. But from where we're at right now on Kauai, we have a lot of tourists here. And I think our hotels, resorts, vacation rentals are pretty booked. It's pretty darn hard to even find a vehicle. I see a lot of visitors rolling their suitcases alongside the highway. And so I'm not in a rush to increase more visitors coming in, because I really think that we already have a lot, and we're going to get a lot coming on 4th of July. But I do know that I think the Lieutenant Governor's concern was confusion and backups at the airport, and I can totally respect his concern and perspective. But at this point, whatever is decided, like everything else, we will find a way to make it happen as smoothly as possible here on Kauai.
On those vaccine percentages, one of the conversations that's been going on is this reaching the threshold of 70%, which would, of course, lift most of the COVID restrictions across the state. But the governor has made the decision to include children in the denominator, meaning that we actually need to get to about 82% of people who are eligible for the vaccine to actually get it. There are some people, especially those in the visitor industry, who say that that's too ambitious and that the governor might want to realign his goals or maybe look at other metrics like hospitalizations and things like that. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that that 70% benchmark is appropriate, and should we count those kids under 12 in trying to reach that?
Yeah, I think you have to count the total population, because when you are talking about, I guess, what's been talked about, herd immunity, which basically means enough people have either been vaccinated or fully recovered from COVID-19 to provide a good layer of protection for those that are still vulnerable and unvaccinated. You have to take into account that total population means total population, and that's the science behind the numbers that were given to elected officials like myself that are not public health experts. But that's what we base our plans on. With that being said, we also have to take into account that this is a new operation for all of us, right? I mean, for most of us, this is the first time we're going through a pandemic. And that being said, we have to have the ability to be fleet-footed. We have to have the ability to pivot and make adjustments to our operation. I will say that if hitting that 70% of total population and we become stuck in a rut, so to say, and yet we're seeing that the case counts are low, hospitalizations are low, people getting on ventilators and the fatality numbers are low, that we should have an open mind to make those adjustments. And I think that is the complicated situation that the governor and the Department of Health is figuring out at what point do we make these sort of adjustments if we don't hit those numbers. And then, of course, for the general public, you have to be able to communicate that plan, because many people are sort of waiting every single day to hear what plan B is. And by now we realize that we have to have contingency plans, because it's not practical to be sort of living in a tier 5 if that 70% never does come. But I will tell you, that being said, we're throwing everything that we can to make vaccines easily attainable and very convenient for people to get if and when they decide to get one.
And let's talk a little bit more about the vaccination process that's happening on Kauai. What are you seeing from those who are currently still not vaccinated? What percentage maybe of the island is vaccinated? And also what efforts are being done to reach those in maybe smaller communities that you have there on the island, and the overall efforts to vaccinate the island and your people?
Oh, so as we speak, 55% of our the total population, including children, have been fully vaccinated here on Kauai, and 60% have initiated their first dose, which is very promising, because if 60% have initiated, most of those people will become fully vaccinated. That's what we're seeing. And that number may be even a little higher, because we don't take into account the federal vaccine, the federal doses, because those numbers are not counted in. you would have to ask our district health officer for more details on the complexity of that. But as we speak today, it's 55%. We have 3 mobile vaccine vans that can also serve as testing facilities, that through the generosity of Priscilla Chan and Mark Zuckerberg, they were able to make that available. Right now, our Kauai District Health Office is trying to staff those vans. Like everything else, it's hard to find workers. But we're going to be utilizing those vans to get to more of the underserved communities, to the demographic where we need to do additional outreach. We just had a meeting with ILWU where I said that, hey, we want to make these vaccines easily attainable. If you folks have a job site where there's an interest in getting a mobile lab, we can always work with our partners at Ho'olalahui and the different hospitals on island, including Wilcox, KVMH, and Mahilona, to help collaborate on those efforts. So we are at a point where we are really decentralizing and really trying to mobilize and get deeper into the community so that we can, pick up those populations that haven't been vaccinated that do want to get one, but it just might be a better fit for us to go to them rather than them come to us.
What are your thoughts on mandating vaccines for certain workforces? Would you ever consider mandating vaccines for county workers on Kauai?
No, I wouldn't want to mandate vaccines at our county workforce. And for the private sector, it's going to be a decision on the employer. And I would say that it's always best to try to understand where the hesitancy is. And if it's because people need more information, we have good resources to get good information over to people. Look, I am fully vaccinated. My children are fully vaccinated. My wife and her family is fully vaccinated. If I had a concern, there is no way I would, put my most precious people out there as well as myself. If it's because of misinformation, well, then we have to do our best to clarify and get good information out there. But as we speak today, it's very much a personal choice. We are encouraging everybody that based on what we saw with our last big cluster and surge on Kauai, that those people that did get sick and were fully vaccinated got through it easy. Like, it was just like mild to no symptoms, didn't require hospitalization. And of course, the people that did become ill were unvaccinated. So, as we move along, the science is starting to really prove its worth as we start to see these cases and who's getting sick, who's not, who's recovering very well.
Here at the City and County of Honolulu, there are, of course, changes that have happened to this tier system that has been set up by Mayor Blangiardi's administration. And one of the requirements for some of those larger gatherings is to provide a proof of a vaccination card or to take a COVID test and prove that you are negative in order to enter maybe a larger gathering or something that would require just a verification process. Is that something that you would consider doing as you look towards the fall, or maybe welcoming in larger events to your island? How do you manage that? And would you look to install some sort of verification process into the events that may be happening?
Yeah, we started working on that initiative as well. And it's definitely a concept that we have really, worked with our private sector partners from the get-go, because it would be incumbent on the private sector, the hotel, the event organizer, to make sure that those verifications are happening. And let's face it, there is a lot that the private sector is laying on the line by having these larger organized events, conventions, luau's, banquets, and dinners, because nobody wants to be the source of a super spreader event. And so I do have faith in our visitor industry partners, some of our luau companies, that if they decide to move forward and submit a plan over to our team to take a look at, that they could verify that, this is an event where we have fully vaccinated attendees. For those folks that didn't get vaccinated, they took a test to show that they are indeed COVID-19 negative and very safe. That is a path forward for them to decide if they want to start increasing capacity. And that is something that we're very open to. But that is something that has been presented over to the private sector, and we're going to let them decide the best path forward. But we continue to work with them to take a look at out-of-the-box ideas such as this, just to help them get back on their feet and add more guests into those type of events.
Through this pandemic, you were someone who came out as more conservative in terms of, allowing openings and your leadership on Kauai. A lot of people really liked what they saw there, and there were some rumblings about perhaps you seeking higher office. Have you given that any more thought? Do you have any aspirations to statewide leadership?
Oh, not right now. Why would I give up a great gig that, I have? I was at the legislature. I value every single moment that I had up there, but I left Oahu to be here on Kauai. The dream job is this, right? To be in a position to help people in my home island, to be able to make a difference. And if I'm lucky enough to do another term, why wouldn't I stick with what I think is like just the dream job? I mean, every day I wake up, right, I'm excited to come in and figure out like how weird is the day gonna get, how much challenges are gonna be thrown on our plate. But I mean, it's balanced here, right? I get to enjoy the Kauai lifestyle and everything that makes Kauai great. I get to go surf and then go and work and be outdoors, be with my family. Once our softball league starts up again, I'm gonna get out there. Look, if I'm lucky enough to serve 2 terms, I'm still gonna be in my 40s when I term out. I cannot look that far down the road, because everything that I'm focused on right now is just what's gotta get done to improve Kauai, what's gotta get done to get us through this big challenge, and then getting back on track to accomplishing some of our top priorities that we had to put on the sideline for a brief moment in time. We're gonna get all those kickstarted again. So I mean, people gotta know like when they got a good thing, and I know that I got a great thing here.
Well, before we let you go, I just did quickly wanted to add one more question. I mean, you'd mentioned the contributions that Mark Zuckerberg had made to this vaccination effort. And there has been, of course, he's a prominent landowner now on the island of Kauai, and there has been some rumblings about some disagreements between that. Wanted to get your thoughts on just overall your interaction with him. It sounds like he is a community partner, that he has been helping on certain areas. How's your interaction been with the CEO of Facebook, and what his contributions have been to the island of Kauai?
Well, I feel like it's been fairly one-sided, in the sense that he's only come to me asking me how can he help, right? He really hasn't asked me for anything at all, and so it's been positive. I know that there is always going to be deeply held feelings about land ownership and resource management in Hawaii because of our history. But so far, all he's done whenever he's reached out to me is to say, Mayor, what kind of help do you need? Where can we fit in to try to bring some of our resources to the table to keep Kauai safe, move us into the 21st century? And I just have to say that he's been a great partner to us. He's been there for us. Priscilla and Mark have been just nothing but critical to our operation. I really appreciate them.
Okay, we know that you have a heart out right about now, so we want to thank you so much for being on with us this morning. Just briefly, if you have any final thoughts for our audience today.
No, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their day to be with us. I really value your time, and we're trying to do the very best job that we can. And like anything else, Hawaii will always find a way to come together, solve some problems, get through one challenge, face another challenge, and just be stronger tomorrow than we were today. So keep your chin up, and we'll get through this.
All right, Kauai Mayor Derek Kawakami, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us here this morning. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you, folks.
Aloha.
Thank you. Aloha. Always great to hear from him. And, he's really echoing what we're seeing across the state, that the tourists are back, the visitors are back. And he's saying, Lieutenant Governor Josh Green had came out and said that the governor needs to basically adopt the 60% restriction level as opposed to what we have right now to avoid confusion. He's saying his island is basically has enough tourists, and he's not worried about opening those floodgates anytime soon, because right now it's hard enough to get a rental car and a room. So there's no rush.
Yeah, no rush. And also saying that the county will continue to look for possible other ways to see how the visitors may have to pay a little more to enjoy some of the beaches, the parks, he's saying, or increase fees, if you will, and making sure that, as he said, make them pay their fair share of what they're experiencing when they visit some of the islands, especially in some of the remote areas like they have on the island of Kauai. Him also saying that he believes that the total vaccination percentage and that benchmark of 70% should be held there, and that it should not be the percentage of available population that could get vaccinated, but rather the overall population in line with what herd immunity can do. But also interesting to know, you pressed him on that question if he would seek higher office. We've asked him that question before on this program a few months back. During that time, he said he's happy in his role as Kauai mayor, and sounding like he's consistently beating that drum.
He's definitely someone that a lot of political analysts have their eye on for seeking statewide office. And so we would be remiss if we didn't ask him, but it does sound like he's very content and has a full plate on his island right where he is. So we'll see if he does do a second term and then where he goes after that. But that, of course, is a long way down the road. Looking at things that are more right in front of us, on Friday, we're going to have the governor on, and we have plenty to talk with him about. He announced his intent to veto list. What does that mean? Is there going to be a special session? And also, we need to ask him about that 70% threshold and if he is willing to consider other metrics to lift more restrictions. Yeah,
and it doesn't sound like the comments that he made yesterday, where he will be accommodating or abiding to that request from the lieutenant governor of changing that 60% benchmark before the 4th of July weekend. And so we will talk to him about those discussions that are happening. Of course, that 70% and that threshold, and just getting a better sense of what he thinks can realistically happen with those vetoes that the intent to veto list that he announced earlier this week. Of course, there are some in the legislative body that are, of course, questioning the governor's vetoes and could essentially call for a special session to then override what the governor is intending to veto, which could then also cause more drama, if you will, at the state capitol during a time where there has been some contentious moments between the administration and the legislative branch. So we'll talk to him about that. Wish we had an hour with him. We only have half an hour. So we'll try our best to get as many questions in as possible.
Yeah, so until then, think about what you want to ask him, and please join us back here, right here at 10:30 on Friday. Until then, have a great day. Aloha.
Aloha.